One is that, like I said, the educational system is broken in the sense of we have what's called information inflation in this world. We now have access to terabytes and terabytes of information at the tip of our fingers. And most education is information regurgitation. It has nothing to do with why we learn what we learn, or how do we utilize that, or the fact that it's holistic, that each subject is connected to the other. And so one of the things I think Apprentice does, and I think Jeff made this point when he said, it could go anywhere, but it still relates back, whether it talks about religion and economics or whatever it might be. And so I think that one of the things that Apprentice does is that it gives that format to allow students to move and grow and dialogue where they're at, but it's not just a regurgitation. It truly is growing in your knowledge and wisdom about the world itself, and which makes for a very, very healthy people. The second thing is, I think that there's a need and an understanding that we've got to back up in our educational world, and we have to begin to teach to receptivity first, right? We don't just teach information or knowledge and then application and synthesis and all those things that they talk about in taxonomies. You have to build lifelong learning. And I believe that one of the things, again, that Apprentice does really well is it builds a context which leans towards Socratic learning, right? So it's a dialogue that's going on. It's a dialogue that good teachers always know where they're heading, but they're always heading in community together. And I think third is the idea of community. That there is no real true learning unless you begin to do that together, and that you have those dialogues, and it's overflowing into life itself with the family, with your friends. And again, I think this context is a great context for real dynamic and meaty, I guess is the word I would think of, meaty learning, something to bite down on and to chew on and to use and not just use and utilize, but to shape and transform life. And so I've always used this term or this phrase that education is meant to be minds enlightened, hearts inflamed, and lives transformed. And most of education is just dealing with the mind, but not the affections in the heart, and not with the overflow of how I react to the world and how I engage the world. And so I'm deeply appreciative of the context that allows that to flourish. Was that too much?
It's wonderful. Anyone else? I can jump in on this if that's okay. Okay. So I would say, kind of in answer to both of your questions combined, there's multiple angles that I could take on this. One of which would be, I would say something that makes education at Apprentice University really valuable, like Brian Hudson said, is that you are not just getting thrown a bunch of content that you then just have to kind of remember, and then maybe later in your life you're going to get to apply. Instead, there's real training in digging deeply into conversations and then applying immediately. And not just that, but more importantly, building habit of doing that. And so in the long term, you're going to see actual growth in your ability to be a good learner who actually likes to learn. I know, as just someone who went to a traditional college that was actually a really good school, my favorite classes were always those that not many other students took, because they were the ones that were super impractical or the ones that were more discussion based. Those were always my favorite because those are the ones you learned the most in, because instead of just giving you a bunch of knowledge that you then are supposedly going to use sometime in the future, they actually try to train you to develop the habits of learning and the love for learning. And I think that's one of the most valuable aspects of the kinds of classes that we have here and the kinds of courses that we have here is that they're focused on not necessarily just the topic at hand, but how this is going to grow you as a person over time. And then in kind of the answer to the other question that you asked, namely, what is it about higher education that we're seeing that might have that we're trying to address? I would say that that is kind of the contrast between apprentice university and a lot of other traditional education formats. You hear from these teachers here that in many places they would be denied the ability to teach just because they don't have a degree that tells people that they can teach, whereas they are actually incredibly skilled professionals who are more than qualified to be teaching in the areas that they work in because they work there. And I think that's something that higher education really misses, is that because they expect some kind of degree from their professors, they're missing out on the actual people who are equipped to train students to do the things that they're actually claiming they're equipping students to do. And of course, there's also the added issue of you're sacrificing all of the knowledge of these amazing individuals to learn from a textbook and learn a bunch of facts that you'll then forget when you get a piece of paper that costs you quite a bit more money than it's actually worth in the long term. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that maybe it's not quite worth it to pursue that avenue of education.
Thanks.
And I'll jump in here just a little bit to play off of what you just said. Not only are we as instructors given an opportunity that would otherwise be denied to us, I don't have a degree that says I can teach college-age students. But we are also giving these students that same ability to go into an interview, and maybe they don't have a piece of paper that says they earned the amount of credits to justify hiring them. We have equipped them instead with practical real world experience and knowledge that has been demonstrated and can be then given to an employer. That's in my industry specifically, but in most industries, that's what employers are looking for anyway. I've personally never had anyone ask me about my piece of paper, which is ironic because they never actually sent it to me, and I wasn't really bothered by it. It's not hanging on my wall anywhere. They forgot to send it to me, and no one cares. The employers that I have spoken with, they want to see what you can do, and they want to see who you've done it with, who have you worked for, and what have you done for them. And what I've been so impressed with, even in just the short time that I've been involved with these students, is they are coming out of this this program with far more practical, real world knowledge than I had when I was 30. And it's astounding. And we're hearing from employers. These are the kind of people, these are the kind of potential employees that they've been looking for a long time. And no one really is concerned about the lack of the piece of paper. So we're giving them an opportunity that so far has been denied to them, but is more and more becoming what is needed and necessary in the workforce.
Great. Jeff, you have anything?
Yeah, I'm going to add just real quick here. Everybody has said some awesome things, but just to add one quick thing, that we are also equipping the students to have a voice where traditional education doesn't necessarily give you a voice. Like I talked about, the conversations can go off on a right turn in our classroom settings, but that's because we have told our students that we want to hear from you. We want to have this open dialogue back and forth. And in some of my subjects, talk about personal finance, and, I teach to have $1,000 emergency fund and don't ever have a credit card. Those are not something that you would typically hear in the world today. Emergency funds are not heard of, and credit cards, everybody's going to have a credit card. So it is amazing to me that we see these students go out into the world, talk with people that they're working with, they're apprenticing next to, and they start these conversations, and they may say, well, my instructor said never to have a credit card. And then they come back and tell me what they said. And it's great to have these conversations and to have that open dialogue back and forth, and that they are learning not just to regurgitate a test, but to have practical answers for the real world that they're going to live in and work in.